Okay, everyone. Welcome to this event. We are going to talk about K through 12 finance, and I recognize already that there are a lot of experts in the room. This is fantastic. There's also people that have not necessarily thought too much about this, but we will hopefully get to hear from other people, and you can share some of your knowledge with us. My name is Jason. I'm with the Debt Collective, and I do a lot of the political education with Debt Collective, including organizing things like this and what we call Jubilee School. We will have a whole year worth of programming in Jubilee School around these questions of K through 12, universities, and other ways to think through education. So be on the lookout for that. But today, we are going to take a critical look at school finance with a particular emphasis on what we can call perhaps the other education debt crisis, and that is K through 12 district debt, particularly of public schools. So I want to show you a slide real quick, just to give you an idea of something that I talked to the Chicago Teachers Union about not long ago. You can see here some school district debt numbers. And one of the reasons why the numbers are presented the way they are, Chicago and then Barrington, which is a wealthy predominantly white suburb to the north, Philadelphia, Tredyffrin, Detroit, Birmingham. And you can see the total education debt numbers. You can also see debt payments. You can see interest on debt. You can see average debt per student. So if you calculate, like do basic division, you can start to see some of these numbers and start to realize the magnitude of the district debt problem for some districts.
We all deserve a moment to recharge and revitalize ourselves.
Okay. You can mute, please. Thank you. And you can start to see the magnitude of the debt crisis. So I'm going to come back to that in a little bit, but this is just a general overview of some of the ways that we can capture how big this debt crisis is. And one way to think about, well, where did these debt crises come from is to recognize that over the last 40 to 50 years, and we see this again through the latest Trump bill, revenue in the form of taxes on millionaires and billionaires and on mega corporations has decreased and not kept pace with school district needs, unless, of course, you're in places like Massachusetts, which fought for and won millionaires tax that is helping make up some of these gaps. What happens when you have this lack of revenue and the revenue goes down that districts need, you get these districts that are forced to take on debt from Wall Street creditors in order to make ends meet. And that is one of the ways where we can start to understand some of those numbers that we saw. We have to recognize, as we could tell in some of and as we showed, for example, with Chicago and Barrington, that the district debt crisis is racialized in class. That is to say that these districts that are predominantly BIPOC, or the districts that are wealthy have more debt, whereas the districts that are wealthier have less debt. And there's reasons for that are related to tax codes and other things that we can get into. So what ends up happening is a lot of these districts that are in major debt end up in what we can call a debt trap, where they're forced to borrow continuously to make ends meet, at the same time that creditors demand cuts to service growing debt or to receive new loans. And so these districts are in a terrible situation. And moreover, I think there's a good case that to be made that a large percentage of the debt that especially poor and working class districts have could be considered odious debt. What that means is that there was little to no democratic debate on taking out the loans. Lenders made the loans knowing that the only way districts could pay it back would be via drastic and draconian cuts to teachers and other services, staff, etc. Future generations will be saddled with the debt, and the same people and entities, mega corporations that make the loan and creditors that make the loans, lobby hard against increasing taxes on their wealth. So when you consider everything that I've said, and I've said it pretty quickly, you have to ask, and this is what Chicago Teachers Union is doing right now, who really owes who what? And the answer becomes, as Chicago Teachers Union is currently showing, is pretty obvious. The districts and the folks that work and study in them don't owe the creditors, or at least they shouldn't, but rather the billionaires and the mega corporations owe us. So in short, district debt is more than an economic reality. It sets up a shadow governance relation in which creditors and credit rating agencies have sway over what happens in our schools. It is therefore not just economic, but also a political and pedagogical issue as well. That causes instructional harms and it undermines democratic decision-making in and of our schools. So what is to be done? The first task of critical work is to reveal, expose, and make clear what the problem or forces of oppression are. And that is what we're here to do tonight, or at least start to do. My colleague, David Backer, who you'll hear from in a little bit, and will walk you through some of the work that he has been doing online and in person, is an expert at making clear some of these usually opaque and difficult to understand debt realities. Where did the debt come from? Who do we owe what? And what do we do about it? So through the steps of uncovering the debt realities, weighing down the schools that we love, the debt loads that are burdening the teachers who teach in those schools, and harming the education experiences of the children that are studying there, we hope that we're taking a small step in flipping some of the covenants, flipping who owes who what, and making it clear that our districts need better funding and debt abolition today. So I'm going to turn it over to David Backer. Thank you so much. And Dave, it's all you.
Great. Thanks, Jason, so much. Can everyone hear me?
We can. We can't see, but we can hear you.
You can't see. Oh, you can't see me?
Nope.
Oh, I see. I see what's happening. Okay, just a second. Okay, for some reason, the camera that I'm using here makes me extremely yellow. But I'm also on the call on my phone, and you can see me in regular color too. So you're getting me in multi-dimensional format here. Okay, so but just to keep things simple, I'll go through in this way. Okay, so what I wanted to do, and this is a training, and there's going to be some very concrete stuff that's going to come at you all very soon. What I wanted to do was just preface it a little bit, and I wanted to say a few things about the approach that we have with this training. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say a few things, a background, and then I'm going to put a document into the chat that I'm going to ask you to download, and then I'm going to walk everyone through that document. It's a worksheet that's going to help us go through, find things about our districts, and begin to do the kind of analysis that we call healthy school finance. And then we're going to do breakout groups where everyone is going to work together in a group to use that worksheet for a specific district that we've chosen. So to kind of practice the skills of this worksheet. And then we're going to come back all together and talk about how that was. Okay, so just a few words about this. You know, one of the reasons why we're holding this training is I started doing TikTok videos, believe it or not, and I started getting requests to look at people's school districts and their budget crises. I don't know what I was doing. I just sort of was like, I study school finance. I study it from a critical background, and then I was like, oh yeah, this is a service. I can do this in a 60-second video. It's sort of like I'm on the phone with you. And I started getting more and more requests, and I ended up with over 200 of those requests. And I thought, you know, instead of having been a teacher, I was a high school teacher. Having been a teacher, I was like, you know, I'd rather people be able to do this for themselves rather than just rely on me. And it's an organizing opportunity. And I think, you know, we can all learn a lot about stuff that's happening in our districts and how to organize around it. So we came up with this worksheet. Now, the concept behind the worksheet and the worksheet itself is titled Healthy School Finance. Now, what's healthy school finance? It's the opposite of toxic school finance. And toxic school finance is when you have odious debt like the debt that Jason was talking about, debt that's a burden, a constant drip on your district, taking away money in ways that we don't really even understand. And on the other hand, the money that's coming in to go pay back that debt and then create, the schools themselves in your districts, the facilities, the education, it's unhealthy. It's toxic. Okay, so there's toxic finance that goes into toxic facilities. And we came up with this concept coming out of Philadelphia, where we've done a lot of work where the school buildings are absolutely falling apart, and we got to know exactly how the school finance stuff works, and it's really complicated, but it's toxic finance. Okay. Now, what's the opposite again of toxic finance? Healthy school finance. Now, healthy school finance is what we're calling carbon-free bonds of democracy, which means that we want schools that, if they have to go into debt, that debt is democratic, it serves the people, it's democratically structured, and the people have a participation in that if they have to go into it, which they shouldn't ideally. And number two, it should be carbon free. Okay, so carbon free bonds of democracy means that the debts that we take on, the revenues that we expend on our infrastructure, our facilities, and our education, that doesn't send carbon into the atmosphere that's going to ultimately make the world uninhabitable for the students who are the schools are supposed to be preparing them for that future. The school buildings let off a lot of carbon, a ton of carbon actually. And what we want to do is we see a sort of green way out of debt, which is to say there's a lot of ways of thinking about the kind of environmental crisis and the debt crisis together to try to come up with this healthy school finance. And doing healthy school finance means that you analyze your school district's finances from this angle. Okay, so it's not just where the debt is coming from and how much it is and stuff, but also the sort of political economy of your district and its status in the climate crisis as well as racial demographics, poverty, property value, etc. So that's my little spiel. Let's get to the concrete stuff. And I see that in the chat, people are talking about you can see me in different windows. There's a very yellow me and a very normal me. So you get your option. Hopefully you'll look at the normal me, not the yellow me, as I'm talking. But let's get this document going. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a document into the chat, and I want you to download it. I promise it's not a virus. It's called Healthy School Finance Worksheet. I'm going to give you a second to download it. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to take you through this worksheet, what it involves, and how to do it. And then we're going to break out into groups, and we're going to actually practice it all together. So far, it's only available in Excel. I'm seeing in the chat. Do you need it in another format? If you need another format, maybe put that in the chat, and during the breakout group, I can try to get it to you. Okay. So just a sec. I'll share my screen. Okay, people are saying a Google Sheet will be helpful. I'll make a fresh Google Sheet link, and I'll send that out. Actually, maybe I'll just share you on this link that I have here. Why not, right? You're not going to be able to fill this one out though. But I think you'll be able to download. Just a moment. Okay, here's a Google Sheet. Okay, so first thing that you're going to see at the top of this document, once you've downloaded it and opened it, is step-by-step instructions. If you click on the step-by-step instructions, you'll see a Google document that is going to take you through every step that I'm about to say. Okay, so even if you don't quite get something that I say, we're going to send out a recording too. But I want you to know that those step-by-step instructions are laid out there. It's an attempt at accessibility as well, and that you can take this back to your communities. Which, by the way, in the chat, I'm just really impressed by the number of different states that we have and the number of different districts that we have. Okay, so after the step-by-step instructions, there's a section I'm calling mapping. And every time, so whenever I get a request, when I look into that request, I map the district. I want to know where I'm thinking about. I want to know some basic stuff about that district. And one of the first maps I look at are climate maps from ProPublica. So if you open up the climate map, what you're going to see is like a series of pictures. And then if you scroll down, you're going to see an opportunity to enter a county. And you find your county. And when you find your county, you can look at the different elements of the climate crisis that affect the county that your school district is in. And that gives you a sense of your climate crisis. Okay, so in the spreadsheet, I have an example from South Orange, New Jersey. And when you go to the climate maps and you find South Orange, New Jersey, you find these numbers, and these numbers are sort of out of 10, and you get the total climate risks. I'm calling it the total climate risk score from these maps. So you get to see, economic damages and wetness is going to be an issue for the county of and it's not the county of South Orange. I believe it's Bergen County. New Jersey people don't get mad at me if I got that wrong. But so we're going to map that first. Okay. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to map the number of students and the demographics of those students, including the students of color, white students, your poverty rate, and your median property value, through something called Crossing the Line Map, which is a map by New America Foundation. It's really, really great. What you do there, here, I suppose I should click on it. You're going to see this. Collapse that. Here you have a map of every school district. You type in your school district here. So I did South Orange, right? It thinks. And it's going to, it should be, I think it's Maple. Yep. And it's going to bring us there. And then you find your district. You click on it. And then you get this box with some numbers. And you enter those numbers in the worksheet. Okay. Go back to our worksheet. You enter the total number of students, percentage of students of color, your percent of white students, your poverty rate, your median property value. Okay. So now you've got a sense of the climate risk around your district. You've got a sense of the racial demographic, the poverty demographics. You've got a sense of the property values. Okay. Now we got two more numbers that we want to find. The next is actually a segregation explorer that looks not between districts, but within districts, which is really important. And there's not a whole lot of information out there, which is why I like the segregation explorer map. And when you go to the segregation explorer map, it's going to take a second to load. Once it loads, you'll see find a place here. So I'm going to do South Orange, Maplewood. Okay, so this brings me to South Orange, Maplewood. But what this does now is it goes school by school and tells you about the segregation within the district between the schools. And you're going to want to find the highest amount of segregation here. So in this case, it's white-black segregation in 0.09. So you enter 0.09. Now this data is a little bit older, but there's no other map that calculates this between school segregation, and so I like to use it. And if you want to, you really want to zoom in, and you can click on each school, and it shows you the name of the school and it gives you information about it. It's a really nice tool. Okay, so we'll go back to our worksheet. So that's the 0.09 number. Now, the last map that I want you to look at is the National Center for Education Statistics district or schools map. And this is a map run through the federal government, which isn't as trustworthy now, but the data is all still here. So we can still use it. And again, you're going to enter in your school district up here at the top. Click on it, it's going to take you there. And the nice thing about this map is that it gives you other kinds of data points. You click on district profile. You see that? I went down here. District profile. And then you get a series of data points, including, in this case, it's important, the number of teachers, FTE, full-time employees. Now you can play around with this. There's all kinds of other stuff in here. There's a demographic dashboard, but this data can be old. But also you can go to fiscal over here on the right side, and it shows you some other numbers that are interesting. But I just want you to stay on the characteristics and get that number of the FTE. Okay. So we've got our number for FTE here. Now that's the easy part, okay? Mapping is fun, and you get to know your district. You all probably know your districts a whole, a lot, but this gives you a beginning of, kind of a structural knowledge. But now we're going to get into the nitty-gritty stuff, okay? So what I call the financial document critique. Now, in the financial document critique, we're going to want certain numbers, and I'm just going to toggle back over to my empty spreadsheet here. We want to find certain numbers, and there are different ways to get the document that we want, which is the audited financial statement. Sometimes you're going to be able to just Google your school district name, audited financial statement, and boom, it comes up. But you might ask, Dave, why don't you ask us to go get a budget? Well, as a higher education finance analyst says at Howard Bunces, he says that budgets begin with B and end with S. And what that means is that the budget is the administration's perspective. It's their interpretation of the situation with the numbers. The audited financial report is an independent audit of those numbers that's not coming from the district and the district's management team. It's audited, okay? So you want the numbers from the audit because those numbers they're independent. It's going to be a little less BS. So audited financial statement, right? Now, how do we find audited financial statements? It becomes very difficult, okay? But my favorite search engine is Emma. And so I like to tell everyone about Emma. And so we're going to go to emma.msrb.org. And it's in the step-by-step analysis too. I can also put the link in the chat. Now, Emma's a little harder to use, but it has a lot of documents. And what you do, first you're going to have to accept some terms. Okay. Andrew asked, does this work for charters? Yes, ... Finding charter stuff is a little more complicated, but you can do it. If you put the charter school in the chat, I might be able to help you, or we could follow up after because it's a very specific process. But for public school districts, you want to go up here to the right-hand corner and you type in a school district. Again, I'm doing South Orange, Maplewood. And here we go. It comes right up, which is nice. It doesn't always come right up, but it does sometimes. And in this case, you get your district. Now, this is just an amazing, amazing resource, okay? Because what you have here are the bonds that the school district has sold, the loans that it has taken out, and the Securities and Exchange Commission mandated reporting files that have to be uploaded and publicly accessible related to those bonds going back in history, okay? And some districts go back to the 70s or 80s. It's very spotty, but in this case, the most recent bond that we have for South Orange Maplewood is from last year, okay? And we can click on it and we can work with it. But I want us to start with the audited financial statement, right? We're going to get to the bond document after that. To find the audited financial statement, you have to go over to financial disclosures. You see you see these options all here? Financial disclosures. We click on that. And now we can find all the financial disclosures that the Securities and Exchange Commission requires any bond issuer in the public sphere to upload into this site. It's true that Emma can be tricky to find your district, as Megan says. So the name of the district isn't the actual name, or sometimes it's condensed. That's why looking for it elsewhere online can be helpful at first. It takes a bit of doing. Sometimes you figure it out. Sometimes the bonds are issued in different in different ways. So you're going to start trying this for your own districts, and that's great. We're going to practice with districts where I know that we can find the documents all together, get used to how this works, and then we can dig in on them. Okay, so in this case, we want an audited financial statement. Now here we have comprehensive 2024 financial report, comprehensive financial report. So we go over here, we click on this green arrow, and we get the document. 215 pages annual comprehensive report. And you know here that accountants and advisors were hired to do it. And we get numbers. Okay, so the next step is Control F is your best friend in doing this kind of work. So what we're going to be looking for is total salaries expenditures. So we'll go back to our document. I'm going to do Control F, get my friendly little field in the bottom left-hand corner. I'm going to do total salary. Oh, wait, let's see. I search for salary. Now, it's not going to come up immediately, and I get 106 matches, but what you're looking for are lines of text. Ah, and here it comes up. Look, salaries. Okay. Now, there's going to be a lot of numbers. And this is something Jason wanted me to say up front, and I didn't say it up front, but I'm going to say it now, and I'm going to say it very clearly. If you're looking at your numbers, I just want you to look up for a second and listen to what I say right now. Numbers are very intimidating. They just are. I myself was not a math student. I wasn't smart like that, you know? And it was awful, and it's been awful. But that feeling is actually part of what holds us back. And so what we have to do is we have to be very kind with ourselves. And to use financial language, we have to take an assets approach rather than a deficit approach when it comes to looking at numbers. What does that mean? It means that you look at these numbers and you just trust what you see there. Don't think about what you don't understand. Just let yourself make meaning of this text, of this document. We are all equally intelligent. No matter how much experience you have, no matter how much knowledge you have, or resources or time, those can all be unequal. But the thing that is equal about all of us is that we can all look at a text and make meaning of it. And so what I want you to do is look at this stuff and just let it sit there. It's going to try to intimidate you, but you're going to say, no, I'm not going to be intimidated by you. This is the very lifeblood, the material conditions of my school district. And I'm going to work with you. Okay. So in this case, we're going to want to find the most recent actual number of salaries. And in this case, we look over here and we see kindergarten salaries of teachers grades 1 to 5, grades 6 to 8, grades 9 to 12. And we see those 4 lines here. We got to add those numbers up in the actual column, not necessarily in the final budget, because the actual is going to be what actually was paid out. And sometimes there's a difference there. As you can see, this is 2.5, this is 2.49. So slight differences. But we're going to want to add these numbers up and put them back in the worksheet for the total salaries expenditure. In this case, it's around 40.3 million. Okay. Now we can go to instruction. And here we have regular programs, undistributed instruction, and we can just look at the total numbers that we have in the actual column, and the total of instruction, we go back here, ends up being 45,579. Okay. So we put that in. Now, the next thing we want to search for is debt service. debt service will come up in a number of places, but we want to find what is the amount that is being paid. And in this case, our regular debt service is going to be 11.4 million. And so you have to go around to see what your regular debts are. You're going to see again a bunch of stuff. State aid debt service or regular debt service. But in the end, it's an $11 million payment. I'm trying to find exactly where that $11 million payment is in this case. And then we'll look for the interest on the debt in just the same way. And you can search interest. Now that's interest income, but we're not looking for income, are we? These are all the interest rates. So again, you look through the numbers and you get to sort of like, oh, what is this? What does this all mean? You sort of dwell in it a little bit, but you find basic stuff and you find stuff to ask questions about. And then we look for total debt outstanding. Okay, so in the long-term liabilities and total debt outstanding, we find a number of hits. And we look through those and we see. And in the case of South Orange, it's a pretty big number, 184.9. Okay. So at that point, we've got a few pieces of information that we can find. And what we can get just from our worksheet is two what we're calling rip-off measures. And in the rip-off measures, we're just in terms of the debt, we're seeing how many teachers the debt would hire. And in the case of South Orange, it's about 170. And in the case of debt as a percentage of expenditures, it's about a quarter. And so it gives you a sense of just the magnitude of this debt. Now, then comes a bond statement. And I don't think we have time necessarily to go for the bond statement, but I just want to give you a sense of it. So if we go back,
can I make one point real quick?
Yeah.
So another way to think of the rip-off measures is like this. In the city of Philadelphia where I live, city of Philadelphia is paying close to $160 million this year to Wall Street creditors. The most basic way to think about this is what could the school district of Philadelphia do with that $160 million if it wasn't going to Wall Street? And another term that's helpful here is that one could say this is a form of extraction. So money is leaving the district that should be in the district and is going to some of the folks that I talked about earlier, these wealthy creditors. And this is why we're terming it a rip-off, because people are getting, the working class or et cetera, are getting ripped off.
Right. All right, I'm looking through the comments here. Well, in this case, we're doing teacher salaries, Casey, but I think, anything that stands out to you should be of interest. So if you want to do total salaries, that includes paraprofessionals and others, then you can get a sense of that. We just included teachers because we work with a lot of unions. Now, New York City is indeed complicated, but I'm going to give you a tip, AB. What you want to look for is the New York Transitional Finance Authority in Emma. And when you get there, you're going to look up one of the recent bonds and you're going to start looking for school stuff. So that's a tip. That's just a tip for you. Am I adding numbers from different columns to find these numbers you are entering? Those numbers are the only one that I added up was the salaries, because I didn't want to just have kindergarten salaries or first grade salaries. I wanted all the teacher salaries there. So I added up the teacher salaries. Every other one was just a single number. Can I clarify debt service versus interest? Jason did that. Thank you so much, Jason. Other Jason, Gemma, thank you for responding. Okay, great. So I answered some things in the chat. Now I just want to take you to a bond. I mean, I love this stuff so much. You can get I really like to get lost in it. This is the stuff of power. This is the stuff of the flows of capital, and this is literally like racial capitalism right there on your screen. And it's the very stuff that when we ask the questions about this at the school board or to the candidates, or we write op-eds about it, this is what gets people's eyes open. It gets their eyebrows lifted. It perks their ears up because it means they know that we're paying attention to the stuff that really deep down matters, because the credit rating, the structure of the bonds, the revenues and the expenditures and the shifts from year to year and what's in what fund, that's the stuff that makes this district work. And all of the stuff, when our movements are demanding more money from the schools, we need more resources, we need more this, we need more that, all that has to be paid for. And when we go in to look at the money, and it takes some time, it's not going to happen immediately, but when we get together with each other and we start actually struggling with these numbers, then we can really start to I believe we can really start to make a difference. I've seen it in my own work. Okay, so let me get to the bond statement. Okay, so now again, I'm in South Orange. Now, before we looked at the financial disclosures, right? And you could click through all of these things. They have all kinds of, I mean, every time I go into Emma, I learn something new. I've just been doing this for a little while. If you just do it over and over again, you start to see things. Okay, but if you click on the most recent bond statement over here under official statement with that green arrow again, you'll get another PDF. It's going to be hundreds of pages. In this case, it's 176. Sometimes they're 400, 500 pages. I've seen bonds that take up a whole bookshelf, just one single bond. Those are the variable rate monsters that got caught up in the 2008 financial crisis. Anyway, here we have a bond from the Board of Education of South Orange Maplewood School District in the County of Essex, New Jersey. Okay, it's Essex County, sorry. Now, these are some of the things in the worksheet when you find your recent bond document. I like to put the links to the documents here because sometimes they get lost. So the first thing you're going to want to know is about the credit rating and the credit rating agency. And fortunately, right on the top, they give you that. Moody's AA2. That's a pretty high rating. The next thing you're going to want to know from this worksheet is the bond principal total. That's the amount of money taking out in the loan. Oops, sorry. And that's in big, bold numbers right here on the front. And this is $25.1 million. So you put that in your worksheet. That's a loan for that in fact is a loan for $25 million. We're going to look at a schedule called a maturity schedule, and we're going to want to find the yield. The yield on a bond, what's the yield? The yield is how much the district has to pay out on that bond for like that's the profits essentially. It's a sort of it's like how much it costs when you're paying it back. And so here we have a maturity schedule. It looks like this. This bond has a maturity schedule, goes out to 2044. It's a long-term thing. Here we have the yields and the interest rates. We want to find the highest one. Now, some people, you can find the average. Okay, but here I believe the highest is at 2044. I think I put 3.9, or did I put 3.8? Yeah, 3.9, that's the highest one. And Jason's throwing some excellent stuff in the chat. I'm probably, the thing is with this stuff, you have to be willing to just be wrong. Like sometimes, like I admit that I don't know everything about this. Like some of the stuff, it's uncertain, and I have not found a whole ton of people who know everything about. They know one little piece. They're little experts on that, and very few of them think about it politically. So the next thing I wanted to in the worksheet that we have is the highest interest rate, and the interest rate is good to know because that's the price that this is sort of getting on the market, and this is the interest that the school district has to pay for getting the loan, and the highest interest rate we see is 4%. Now, for people who have mortgages or student loans, you know that the interest rate on your loan is really important, and when it's over 0, it's a big deal, and this is 4%. That's a big deal for a public school district to pay 4% on a private loan, I just it makes me really mad every time I think about it, and I think about it all day. So there are a couple other things, that we want to find, but I think tonight, it's already 8:48, and Jason, we had this whole thing planned. I don't even know if we're even going to get to it. It might just be good to just answer some questions and then do group work on the next one of these that we have. But the other thing I wanted to point out to you in the bond statement is like who's involved. Okay, UBS Financial Services is involved here. That's what we call the underwriter. But there's also a bevy of other people involved that you can start to kind of follow the money, and you start to see a kind of regional ruling class around your school district emerge. So here we have Weilance, Goldman, and Spitzer from Woodbridge. They're the bond counsel. So they have to pay lawyers that are specifically bond lawyers to make sure that this thing is sort of kosher and legal. But there's also Lennox Law Firm. There's Phoenix Advisors LLC. Phoenix Advisors are all over the place. They're sort of like they've cornered the market on providing financial consultant services to public school districts to go to Wall Street and sell these loans and stuff. So they're there, and they everyone takes a piece. The credit agencies take a piece, the consultants take a piece, the lawyers take a piece, and the underwriter takes a piece, and it's called the underwriter's discount. And you can actually see how much that ends up being if you can find your costs of issuance. Okay, so we don't have enough time to go into all this, but I wanted to, this is the first time we're introducing this worksheet. I wanted to introduce this worksheet to you because what this will do, if you can fill out numbers, or you can attempt to fill out numbers and then try to figure out if these are the right things or the wrong things, this is going to give you a starter step, a first step towards understanding the kind of political economy of the school finance of your district, and it's going to be a step towards the healthier school finance from a toxic school finance. The fact that there are credit rating agencies involved, the fact that there's a private bank that's the underwriter, the fact that there are huge sums being paid out for interest on this. The capitalists will say that, oh, this is like it's a market efficient system, and this is how we allocate credit, and it's better to have a competitive buying and selling of loans for public school districts on the municipal bond market to be able to allocate that credit for stuff. But that is just baloney. It stinks. Okay, that's not right. That's not an efficient way to allocate credit. It's not a good way to do it, and we can start to get an understanding of just how bad it is with respect to salaries and instruction expenditures and debt service. So and it gives you in the context of the climate crisis, and there's so much more, but this was just the beginning.
Okay, I want to just do a real quick summary of some key points, and then I think, Dave, you're right. I think we should just open it up for questions and answers today, and then on part 2 we can go through people go through the worksheet, etc. So first thing is school districts need more money. They don't have enough money because the taxes are decreasing for the wealthy. School districts go into more debt. Dave showed us how we can find some of these debt realities. That debt comes at a cost because we're framing this as a ripoff and that this is a form of extraction. So this is money that should be in the districts, especially poor districts, and it's being siphoned off to wealthy creditors. The credit rating agencies have enormous power over what happens over our schools. Why? Because they give schools grades, those numbers and letters that Dave showed you. The credit rating agency says if you want to get a loan, you have to do certain things. For example, like not have strong unions or go on strike because that's a threat to the debt service. So with some of these ideas in mind, what Dave showed you is like, okay, but when we get into this, how do we find the numbers? How can we hang in the conversation when people start to get all wonky and start to talk to us about like, well, this is the realities you guys don't understand, etc. So one of the ideas of the worksheet is that the worksheet gives us the numbers so that we can start to calculate some of the costs and then have some of these conversations amongst our colleagues and others about like, well, we know the numbers now, what do we do about it? This is a bit overwhelming. There's a lot here. This is part one. Let's open it up for questions. And the way we can do this is if you have a question, if you could kindly type the word stack in the chat or just put your question in the chat, that would be great. Otherwise, I might not see you if you raise your hand because there's 3 pages of the flow through. So Terry has a question. Gregory has a question. Terry, do you want to read your question out loud or what should we do? It's up to you, Terry.
Putting the kids down to sleep, so if you don't mind reading it.
All right. Thank you so much for tuning in while you're doing that. So Terry writes, do you consider both interest and principal ripoff? Could bankers or random centrist friends say the principal, oh, just skip, hold on, sorry. The principal is what we borrowed. Dave, do you want to answer that question or?
Yeah, I gave a response in the chat. It's a great question, politically speaking, because what people are going to say is, well, this is the money that we took out. We took this out, right? And so we got to pay it back, and to not pay it back is irresponsible. The response to this is to say something like, the system for schools to get the revenue they need for the infrastructure that literally houses these students, the air that they breathe, the hallways that they are walking on, the floors, the walls, the very brick of this red brick schoolhouses, that should not be a commodity bought and sold on Wall Street where people make millions and billions of dollars in fees. That's wrong. Okay, so going from that premise, then what do you say? Well, now it might be the case that in some form, somebody somewhere will have to borrow money to be able to get the capital needed for the running of a public school district. That's true. But who takes on that risk, how they take on that risk, how much it costs, the terms of that loan are very, very important. So for instance, why should a school district take on the risk of a huge loan at a 4% interest rate to be able to pay for an HVAC upgrade so the students can breathe? To me, that doesn't seem right. Now, some states do it a little better than other states. So Massachusetts does it well, and Wyoming actually does it very well. But I sort of cut my teeth on this stuff in Pennsylvania, and in Pennsylvania, every school district is out for themselves. And so you ask people, should there be loans here? What are the terms of these loans? Who's involved? Who's making all this money? I think that's an important conversation to have. It looks like maybe Gregory.
Yeah. I think I see, Gregory and then TW and then Christy, JE, and Jason. So, Gregory, I don't know, do you want to ask your question? Is that what you typed in the bottom there or?
Yep, that's it.
Okay.
Looking for examples
Yeah.
of healthy finance districts, either that have been won through organizing and that just exist in the wild to look toward as a model.
Yeah. Let me say one thing about that, Dave, and then
Yeah.
I think one thing that we want to point out is that the wealthier districts have a very different financial situation when it comes to debt and debt service. And one of the reasons why they have a healthier situation is because their tax revenue is higher because there's wealthier people there. So one of the things we're trying to do is to also get to like some of the structural issues and inequalities of school finance and school funding. That would be a short answer. And then Dave, you want to say some more? There's a lot more to say about that, but go ahead.
Yeah. So I put in the chat my book that's coming out in December. I talk about a lot of examples that are good. And I do it more justice there on the page. But just a couple of things just to plant a seed. Things that I like that exist right now include the Twin Cities fiscal disparities programs that have existed since 1971, and they do something called tax-based revenue sharing. They compress inequities between municipalities within the region of the Twin Cities and actually redistribute a percentage of the growth in the municipal revenue according to who has a good year, who has a bad year. and they sort of work together in this. It's one of the more American collectivist decentralized examples that has been actually existing since the 70s. They called it the Minnesota Miracle. They also called it prairie socialism. And it's something that I think I like to tell people about. The other thing, and I think Jason mentioned this, in Massachusetts, they have the millionaire's tax now at the state level. But not only that, do they have they have that, and they fought for that, and it's an incredible thing. But they have the Massachusetts School Building Authority, which provides 80% reimbursement to school districts, as well as technical services and know-how for infrastructure financing. So 80% is a lot. And Connecticut, I think, has 65%. Virginia has a public school authority that pools the risk. Wyoming has been funding their school facilities through coal bonds for decades now. These are interesting programs. My favorite school finance law ever is a historical one, and it's from Vermont in the late 1990s. It's called Act 60. And I can tell you a little bit about that. I'll just say that it's my favorite, and we can maybe talk about why later. But there are things out there. There are possibilities, and we can work towards them.
Yeah, and TW and AC are having a conversation in the chat that I just want to call attention to, and for one reason, that how do we get bonds to fix buildings, et cetera? And then AC mentions, the bonds tend to go towards new buildings. Older buildings don't seem to get much repair. One thing to point out about this, and I don't know if Selena's still on the call, but these processes are often radically undemocratic, meaning there isn't enough public input. There's not enough deliberation over a lot of what happens, how the money gets spent, the loans, et cetera. And so one of the things that we want to point out is, by learning some of the knowledge about how to find out about these numbers, how it works, we can hopefully start towards a process of democratizing this whole process. So I just want to mention that. And Selena's got a book about this, which, Selena, I see you are here, so do put your book in the chat, please. I lost track. So we got any other questions, Gemma and Dave? Ryan's got a question, and maybe we take like two more and then we call it a night. So Ryan, do you want to read your question out loud?
Yeah, I'm basically saying, what are the good basic alternatives? And maybe a more general question is, like, what are the types of alternatives? That's the basic thing. And maybe I'm also thinking, looks like there's a lot of people who want to do something here. Like, what's the thing you do in what time frame?
This is great. Go for it, Dave.
Yeah, I can say a couple of things here. Okay, so, and this came up in a couple of the other conversations, like, school buildings are crumbling, and this is the revenue stream to fix them. We want the buildings to be fixed. Okay, we don't want to stand in the way necessarily of a bond going through at this moment, because we don't have any alternative structures. So there are things that we have to do in the very, very short term to figure out this terrain, and then things that we have to think about in the long term. Okay, so in the short term, what do we want to do? We want to make this more participatory and democratic. What does that mean? It means if your school district is going to be doing a bond, to what extent is the community involved in the negotiation of the terms of that bond? To what extent is the community at all involved in the choice of the underwriter? To what extent we have to start bonding for the common good, as we say, we say bargaining for the common good on the contract, but we want to start bonding for the common good. We want to get everyone kind of start to be involved in this. So first we have to do a bit of education, consciousness raising for sure. We have to figure out how this stuff works. But we want to be involved, okay? Next, I think, I am a big proponent of a kind of green turn in public financing for public infrastructure, because a lot of green financing options that exist right now are more public than traditional ones. So what do I mean by that? Lots of states now have something called a green bank. And a green bank is a public entity that can structure investment products for public infrastructure that will not be emitting carbon, but also put elected and appointed officials in the driver's seat for the construction of the deals, more so than in the traditional manner. So when thinking about how a bond could be better, people could get together and say, hey, school district, have you talked to the Green Bank people about how we might be able to structure something here so that we can save stuff on fees, make our infrastructure more efficient, put less carbon in the atmosphere, and also be less indebted to the Wall Street. So that's something, these are things in the very short term. Now, in the long term, talking about political imaginaries here, there have been a lot of calls for something called the National Investment Authority, which would pool the risk of infrastructure financing at the federal level, much like we have a Federal Reserve that pools the risk in terms of banking and protecting from bank runs and stuff in our reserves, that we have a National Investment Authority. Now, given this country's track record right now with the federal government, I'm not so sure that we want to trust the federal government as much now, but maybe we do. I don't know. That's one imaginary. Another imaginary, and this is something I talk about with people sometimes, is to start a credit union for public education. Now, what would that mean? That could mean that school districts deposit their reserves at a bank where they are member owners of the bank. And that credit union for public school districts across the country, as a kind of market entity, quote unquote, even though it's owned by its members, can structure deals and lend money on whatever terms it wants. It can make a market just like an underwriter does. And these are things that we can think about, but there's all kinds of other stuff too. I also think that running for school board, getting involved on the finance committee of your school board, starting to ask questions and looking at the budget, that it's not just shaming your school district, which should be done. Of course it should be done, but it's getting into the numbers and asking them questions, and then being a kind of oppositional dialogue with them, being like, well, what's this? Where did this money go? How could we do this a little better? It's not necessarily just putting all the blame on them that they're corrupt and stuff, but actually looking at the numbers. I think that's I rambled a little there, but yeah.
Yeah, and I want to call attention to something that Jim put in the chat around abatements. And this goes back to this question that was raised already about like when you don't have enough tax revenue coming into the district. And so in the case of an abatement, you have certain companies, or in like Philadelphia, for example, the University of Pennsylvania will get an abatement. They won't pay certain taxes. That takes away revenue that the public school district could use. When the public school district doesn't have that revenue, if they want to keep certain things going, they have no choice but to take on loans. So do you see how this works out, where you lack the revenue and then you become reliant on Wall Street and the lenders, then you're driven into debt. So the same wealthy groups that are getting tax breaks are often lending, and they're making profit in those two different ways. So that abatement point that Jim makes is really important. Are there any other questions or comments before we start to wrap this call up? I'm impressed. We have 47 people that stayed on, and it's a Friday night, and this is pretty obscure, wonky stuff, so that's great. Yeah, thanks to you. One other point about the building power, we have a real hope that if you're in a teacher union, if you are in a parent group, if you're involved in any way, shape, or form in K-12 education, our hope is that you can start to talk to other people about this, and that this becomes an issue that is more commonly discussed and critiqued before it's too late. Because one of the things we know is that the Trump bill is going to take billions of dollars away from public schools. They're going to look for cuts somewhere, but you know who won't take a cut? The creditors. The creditors will always get paid. And that doesn't seem right. Dave, last word?
I just wanted to thank everyone for coming out, and I'm at School Daves across social media. If you want to find me on Instagram or TikTok or Blue Sky or Twitter, and if you want to DM me, I'm super happy to work through things. I like helping people out. But take the worksheet, start working with it, and we're gonna have a follow-up. So stay tuned.
Yeah, so really quick about the follow-up. It will be on October 3rd. we will send out information about how to sign up. Feel free to tell others. And that'll be through Debt Collective again. So if you signed up for this one, you will get an email about the next one. And we will do more hands-on, like you can practice with some of the numbers that Dave showed us. We'll have time for questions and answers. And really, this is a long-term process, and it deserves a lot of patience. This is only the beginning to just like start to get our heads around this issue. Thank you so much for being here. Bring some hope in some pretty dark times, and don't give up, because we got a lot of money to take back from the wealthy. So have a great night, everybody. We'll see you on October 3rd. Bring a friend or two. And in the meantime, reach out with any questions that you may have. Take care.
Thank you.